Hi everybody. Today I have a special guest. This is Sean Ritchel,
Hi.
who happens to be Steve's cousin. Where am I right now?
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yes. First stop was to visit Steve's aunt, Steve's cousin Sean, and I thought Steve's cousin Sean is also very, very creative, and I thought it would be perfect to allow him to come give you all some of his creative guidance. He also happened to have spent a lot of time with Steve and I. We were just remembering all the times he came to visit. 6 times, right?
6 times, that's right.
Yeah, so he got to see Steve's progression at many different phases.
Right.
Pre-trach, post-trach, when he was really super skinny, when he finally gained weight,
Right.
when he was getting out of bed, when he wasn't getting out of bed. And actually, we stopped here to see them on the road trip that Steve and I also took. So, Sean's also a rapper, which if you stay tuned to the end of this video, I will include some of his raps, especially one he made for Steve, and it's going to have a little Steve visit in it.
That's right.
So, Sean was once a high school teacher. High school?
High school, barely, 9th grade.
Okay. And he got burnt out, right? Or did you want...
It's time for a change.
What made you decide to have that change?
Well, high school teaching was very rewarding, but I wasn't particularly hot on the life of employment, so I wanted to delve more into entrepreneurship.
Yes. And now what are you doing?
So I entered real estate.
And I will list his Instagram. You have to follow it because he kind of rap sells the houses.
Sometimes, yeah.
Has that actually helped adding creativity in listing the houses? Has that helped you sell houses?
Well, ironically, that particular one had the longest days on market. But
That's amazing.
I think so. I don't know if that's a testament to my rapping skills, but I think it definitely gets some attention, and I had several people, clients as well as other realtors and colleagues reach out and be like, hey, that caught my attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so does adding creativity to it, does it kind of just help feed your soul? Is that what made you led to do it?
Yes, I definitely felt like once I entered real estate, I kind of had to find my footing. Okay, how do I make this my own?
Yeah.
And so that was an opportunity to incorporate what I've always done into the new endeavor.
And will you tell us a little bit how you used to rap for the kids at school?
Sure, yeah. You're always trying to figure out ways to motivate young adults, to inspire them, to get that fire lit underneath them. And it's not always easy to do. So for me, I just saw it as an opportunity. Okay, again, do what you do best. And when you bring that high energy rap, it can be contagious.
Yeah. And
Didn't always work.
But you were doing it with motivational messages behind it too, right?
Yeah. There was, at one point I wanted to travel the country and speak in high school gymnasiums as a motivational speaker.
You'd be so good at that.
And rap, and so I tried to make it as positive as possible, as uplifting as possible, so they could leave the classroom feeling more confident about themselves. It's an extremely vulnerable age, so anything to recognize their unique abilities as an individual.
Yeah, I love that. So, in witnessing Steve and I and how we used creativity to kind of survive,
right?
Do you feel like you use creativity the same, or what does creativity do for you?
Well, I don't know. So, first of all, when it comes to inspiration, you and Steve are the biggest. You guys talk about using creativity to overcome the hardest of hardships, from your painting, the Drive campaign, to the movie, the documentary, to all the stuff you did with your arts and crafts, and the shed turned art studio in the backyard.
I miss the she shed.
It really became a place of creativity, not just a house you would never define it as a place of suffering. Even though there was a lot of suffering involved, that drive to overcome that really shone through. There was a light on the house. So
Thank you for saying that.
I feel like when I create, or when anybody creates, I think that's ultimately one of the main goals, is to either, if not escape, cope with whatever suffering or pain you might be feeling. And it ultimately is just fun.
Yeah. What is your creative process? Do you actually have a writing practice, or do rhymes just kind of flow to you?
Yeah, if there's inspiration, of course, it can just flow like water. And then other times you have to be a little more intentional. Um, it's kind of like that Yoda quote: "Do or do not, there is no try." So create or do not create.
Yeah.
They say the best way to write is to just start writing, stop thinking and start writing. So sometimes it can trip you up because you immediately start judging your creations before you've really even created them.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to keep in mind. Nobody is, until you have a finished product out, it's just you that's seeing your work.
Yeah. So how long have you been rhyming? Has this been something you've done all the time, forever, or is this something that you found later in life?
I was pretty young. I'd always had an affinity for rap music and hip hop, and I think "Gangsta's Paradise" by Coolio is one of my earliest memories, and
I love that.
I fell in love with it, the style, R&B too. So yeah, it was a kid. Like I was like 9 or 10 when I started writing poems and then raps, and then I just kept writing,
Yeah.
performing.
That's awesome. Is there anything that you feel your creative process has brought you that has surprised you in life?
That's a great question. Anything I feel that my creative life has brought that I would think is surprising.
Because you come from a very creative family. Your mom's creative, your sister's creative, in vastly different ways than you, but like still, you guys all have your own way of creative expression. Were you expecting that?
I think it was just something that happened naturally. Growing up around my mother, she was always creating something, whether it was a poem or a dissertation while studying for a PhD. And then my sister, too, she grew up painting on canvas, everything from paints to pastels. She was really involved in her art classes growing up, and then went on to become an art history major and art tour guide. So I think just being around it, I didn't really know any different.
Yeah. And so it just kind of rubbed off on you.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think about Steve. He never thought that he was creative until we started
Really?
the Drive project.
Interesting.
Because he was always very business minded, and he grew up in a very business oriented family, and he was always sports. He was incredibly athletic.
Right.
And then when it came to the Drive project, and he would come up with colors, and we worked with our artist friend often said to Steve, did you study color theory? And Steve would say, what is that?
Yeah.
He just naturally
What is that?
had the taste and the vision for it. Did you say, what is that?
What is, it's color there. It's for another,
Yeah, future video. Maybe I'll interview Elaine.
Yes, she'll be the one to answer that
Sister.
question.
But yeah, he didn't study art. He just picked the colors, and when he was able to drive, his wheelchair, he would just move in whatever patterns like he felt. And when he would instruct me to drive, once he stopped being able to drive, he would just kind of like, you were there once, when he would just kind of look in the direction of where he wanted to go. He would look at the colors we wanted to pick.
Right.
And he said he wanted everything to just be like this movement, but he had no training. It just kind of came out of him. And I think this is a testament that even the people who think that they're not creative even a little bit, it's there.
Right.
Sometimes it just takes life to allow it to come out.
Right. Well, I think it's really interesting that you said that Steve felt he was never creative, but then you mentioned he was always into business and athletics. I think it's very common in our society. We tend to associate creativity a lot of times solely with artistic creativity, musical creativity,
Right, right.
when really, I mean, to be good at business, you have to be super creative. To be good at athletics, Steve was a big golfer growing up and hockey player. Super, again, to be good at anything, I think requires creativity.
I agree.
Because
Yeah.
in order to stand out above the rest, you got to do things differently.
I
Be
love
more
that.
creative.
I love that. And I think that feeds into me too, because I also didn't think I was creative. Like, I like to scrapbook, and that was like the extent
Lots
of it.
of creativity.
Yeah. And then I needed something to cope with being stuck at home, and like somewhere to put all that energy of the stress and the anxiety and the worry and the frustration and all of the things. And so I just started to paint at the same time as Steve. And at first I had to get over feeling like the judgment you were talking about. Like, I was like, well, I'm terrible at this. And I remember my friend, she said something really beautiful, and she said, you have to sometimes practice until your art catches up with your taste, but it will eventually.
Nice.
And that's also how you find your own voice.
Nice.
And so she said, like, don't give up on it, because the more and more you do it, the more and more you're going to find your thing. And so I actually stopped worrying about the outcome of my art and became very focused on, okay, I have to eliminate energy. Let me just go play. And playing and exploring is actually how I found art that I like. Like, I feel really pleased with the art I make now, because I found my voice and my way of expressing what I'm trying to express.
So when you say you had to just stop worrying about your and just do it, was that worry stemmed from like fear of disapproval from others, that your art wouldn't be accepted, that you wouldn't be taken seriously as an artist?
Yeah, because I have really brilliantly talented friends.
Yeah.
And I got caught in that comparison trap where I'm like, well, my art doesn't look like theirs, so it must be crap.
Right.
And then it was understanding that actually everyone will like everyone's art at some point. Like, everyone's taste has a person out there that they're gonna like. And so there is somebody that's going to like your art. And what actually matters, and it's like Rick Rubin is one of my favorite people.
Yes.
And he talks about how it's like you're really making it for yourself.
Right.
And when I embraced that, that's when I actually found people that also appreciated my art, because I think they could feel what I was putting into it.
It's so funny you mentioned Rick Rubin.
Fall over.
Oh, could. Those southwestern desert winds.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention that book by Rick Rubin that he recently what is it, The Art of Creativity?
Yeah.
Or it's got the big target on the
I love
center.
that book, and now I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, it's slipping my mind too, but in there he talks about, again, that definition of creativity, and that when somebody prepares dinner in the kitchen, when somebody, like, there's creating happening everywhere all the time. It just kind of, it doesn't have to be some tangible item to hang up on the wall. Yeah. And so I love that you were able to overcome that. And ultimately, it's so funny, right? Comparing yourself to others, right? Especially when you have friends who like are making a career out of it, and who are, known as an artist. That can weigh heavy. But then it goes back to the classic idea of not comparing yourself to. You're only competing with your version of yourself from yesterday. Yeah. Right.
And I love that. Okay. Anything else?
What? Well, you asked. I'm trying to think of questions to ask you. How many? Going back to the Hope for Steve days, how many? Because you guys were so prolific. That's what I remember. You just like, at one point you guys were just churning out drive after drive after drive campaign. It's almost like you were working around the clock. How many drive paintings did you guys do?
I really wish I knew the answer to that. And when I can convince my friend Jeremy to be interviewed, because I've been working on him, he will be able to answer that, because he was the muscles behind all of it.
That's right.
God love him for it.
Shout out Jeremy.
Yeah, Jeremy Brown. If you're not following him already, you should be. But we would just, anytime that we could get Steve up, it was really a blessing.
Right.
And it got to the point where I needed help. So anytime Jeremy was free, and he'd be like, hey, do you want me to come over and paint today?
Yeah.
We'd say yes, because it was hands to help
Yeah.
me get Steve up.
Yeah.
And we would just make as many as we could until Steve couldn't handle it anymore.
Right.
And so that's why there was always so many, because we just made the most of every opportunity we had.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, he had 6, 7 art shows, I believe, and then
Wow.
would sell out those. And then we also had all the ones on the website that would always sell out. So, yeah, and then we filmed it all, documented basically all of it so that we can also spread awareness. And then I'm still working on the book so that there's that awareness. And yeah, I think that us creating was literally what got us through everything.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. And these days, what do you think is your favorite medium of creation? Is it scrapbooking, painting, arts and crafts?
I am always going to love making weavings because I feel like it's the thing that I do that honors my grandmother, because she used to be a weaver.
Yeah.
And she weaved with wheat, which is
Oh,
really
wow.
cool. So I like to incorporate a lot of dried flowers into it. But painting and like doodling with oil pastels will always be my favorite thing. There's
Yeah.
just something about getting like covered in paint and just
Yeah,
splashing
Getting a little
and
messy.
making something really colorful that can shift energy for me. It's
Nice.
so, I think they're tied. I
Yeah.
can't pick one
The
or
weaving
the other.
and the pasteling
Yeah.
and painting.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
I've been doing, I have this whole book of pastel art that I'm then putting a lot of the writings, like poems and processes, over and making zines with.
Yeah. Zines,
Yeah,
which are...
little baby magazines.
Oh, zines. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a new one.
And then
I love it.
I published one, and I have 2 more in the works. Stay tuned.
Nice.
So yeah.
Prolific.
Okay, is that it? I'll end it in a better way if you think it is it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you know, of all the takeaways, you know, that I've had from you and Steve, and your creative process, I think there's a lot to be said about. There's this quote from Eckhart Tolle, the author of A New Earth, who talks about, you know, in the face, when we're literally on our deathbed, how everything else just falls away, and like that's one of the moments that we become most present
Yes.
in our lives. And we spend so much of our lives trapped in thought, in the past and the future, trapped in worry, trapped in anxiety about what may happen, and most of the time it never does.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think, you know, for somebody like Steve, who had never created before in the artistic realm, you know, I think that's a prime example of that. Like, look, this, and I know you guys always said it in the documentaries and the interviews on CNN, you know, hey, like I know my days are limited, and so let's create.
Yeah.
Let's create. And of course the great irony of that is of course, you know, ALS or not, all our days are limited.
Yes.
So just a greater, what a powerful story, you know, that you and Steve told and continue to tell.
Thank you for that. Honestly, I think that was our biggest message we try to get across, was that like our days are limited, so make the most of every day you have.
Right.
And he asked me at lunch earlier if I felt like I was doing good in my healing process. And I said to him, yeah, actually, because this is news to y'all, but recently I had to put Marlo down, and Marlo was a wedding gift from Steve.
Yeah.
And
Rest in peace, Marlo.
putting her down was very much so like my last tie to Steve physically. Like, obviously, I'm tied to Steve forever, thankfully, energetically, but I handled it way better than I thought, and I handle working with patience and grief better than I thought, and I owe that to the fact that I also still kept a creative process all throughout this time since Steve's passed. And that's actually what I'm in New Mexico for, is to celebrate Steve-iversary is what I always call it. On April 2nd
Nice.
will be 4 years since he's passed, and
That's
so
right.
I do believe I've done a great job with the healing because
Absolutely.
of creativity.
Yeah. No, well said.
Yeah. All right. So this is Sean. Y'all should definitely follow him, and you know, support people out here trying to like live their best lives. Really.
Amen.
Okay.
Thanks for watching.
8 years at ALS and my man still breathes. Ain't nothing tougher than the cutest couple, hope and Steve. Smile to the bright side, trying not to stress. Steve, what you gotta tell him, man?
Fuck ALS.
Yeah.